The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, August 30th, 2019. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live two-tape steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On today's program, Cain. I don't know if I would call him a former white nationalist, but a guy who had gone down the rabbit hole and came back out. The New York Times featured him in an article. And now what he's doing is basically working on a de-radicalization project where he's trying to reach other young, mostly men, who are falling down a YouTube rabbit hole into white radicalization, I guess.
It's like the Christian Picciolini of online sort of alt-right people.
Yes. And I interviewed him on Ring of Fire, and then I wanted to interview him again for this program because... And part of it is obviously it's both a story of what the future of politics are going to look like, I think. It's also a story of what the present of politics looks like in some weird ways. And for me personally, it was, it confirmed some reasons as to why, like, we orient at least the fun half of the show towards YouTube a little bit. Because this is where the fish are, basically. And the fish, if we're not there, then they're going to get sucked up by some other fishermen. I don't know. I'm on vacation, folks. It's Casual Friday, but I'm actually on vacation. We still are playing this new content for you because that's the way we roll here. And if you're a member, you will get extra content in the form of some deep archive cuts from the deep archive vaults. Majority Report back in the aughts, ladies and gentlemen, with Janine Garofalo and I on Air America Radio. So stick around for that. If you're not a member, easy to become one. Go to jointhemajorityreport.com. All it takes is basically a couple of dimes and nickels a day, and you are supporting the free show, and you're getting extra content. You're getting the free show commercial free. So it's a win-win-win-win, as it were. I am on Caleb Cain's Twitter handle. It is Faraday, Faraday, speaks on Twitter. You can reach the Discord and check out the Faraday fam community on Discord, where you're working on the de-radicalization project. But his top tweet as of today, August 20th, is Matt Leck. And he's retweeted your respected Tommy Lauren. Not a good look for those boys. But check it out. It's a really interesting story, and it gives you a better insight into what's happening with the young people and where our politics could be going and this and that. So fascinating story. Don't forget, if you were doing the AM Quickie every day, I don't think we're going to do it on Monday, on Labor Day. I think we're going to pass on that day. And on Labor Day, we're going to be playing our classic Labor Day montage of labor speeches. But we will be back live on Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen. Raring to go. It is going to be, well, let's face it, it's going to be a crap show. It's going to be a crap show for the next 12, 13, 14 months. And then after that, it could even be worse. But hopefully it'll be marginally better. Marginally better.
Hopefully we can hit a valley.
Exactly. But in the meantime, enjoy this interview. We will be back live on Tuesday. Labor Day show on Monday. Caleb Cain. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome to the program Caleb Cain. Caleb was the subject of a New York Times article. I guess maybe it was in the communities to essentially radicalize or indoctrinate people into the alt-right. And Caleb, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Sam. I'm really glad to be here.
Now, I mentioned to this, I spoke to you on Ring of Fire maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I mentioned this at the upfront on that interview, and I will mention it again for the sake of this audience. I can't remember what it was, 2 or 3 months ago, maybe it was more. We got, or maybe it was Matt had gotten a DM from you or something to that effect. And somehow your video got our attention where you went on to talk about how you had left the alt-right and we were thinking, should we book this guy? And I have to say that my first instinct was, I want to see a little bit more, see if this is vetted, because this is something, it seems to me, that the alt-right would do. It's certainly, I have to say, it's something that I've contemplated doing over the years. But it turns out, and maybe you're in this for the long con, but assuming you're not, tell us about yourself and just sort of give me the broad strokes, just a timeline of what we're talking about, this period in your life that has brought you to this point.
Yeah, so it starts out, I grew up in West Virginia in like a kind of a poor town, like upper, lower class, lower middle class, and went through high school, didn't really work too hard. Teachers liked me, they said it was bright, but I kind of just meandered through, and then I kind of got my act together my senior year, went off to college, had all this like opportunity and promise, and then I kind of fucked it up by basically just getting depressed and not going to class and stuff like that. And I came home kind of broken and defeated, was majorly depressed. I don't know how long. I laid in bed for a long time, only getting up to use the bathroom and eat. And I went on YouTube, and I was just like, I have to fix this. I have to fix this somehow. And I was like, well, YouTube's my only source. And so I went on YouTube, and I found like this gamer, Athene Wins, that did like neuroscience videos. Was watching that, kind of realized.
I'm sorry, let me just stop you here. To be clear, you went on YouTube to figure out how you can feel better, essentially, right?
Basically, yeah.
Okay. And what year was this?
That would have been 2012, 2013, something like that. I would have been 21 at the time. I'm 26 now.
Okay, and so just so people know, like we're 2012 in terms of like YouTube really started, kicking in maybe around 2008, it seems to me, in terms of like when things started to become content. So, for someone your age, YouTube had been like, the functional equivalent of like the encyclopedia. Do you even know what I mean by encyclopedia?
Oh, no, yeah. Basically, like I grew up, and when I was in high school, if I wanted to learn how to do something or wanted to know something, I went to YouTube. There wasn't a ton on YouTube back then, but that's where I went for information.
Okay.
That was like my resource. It's better than the library.
Well,
so,
and I say this only because you were probably on the cutting edge of people, of kids, of young people who saw YouTube as this sort of resource. Like, I'm not sure that people understand, older people understand the role that YouTube plays in, as a source of information for people, particularly your age and younger in particular. But go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of older people don't understand the power of YouTube. They think it's just cat videos, and this is why. No, it's a lot of people see it as a serious platform. This is why I think YouTubers should take their platform very seriously whenever they put out information. But yeah, so I went onto YouTube. First found Athene Wins. He did a neuroscience video called God is in the Neurons, and I was watching that, and I realized, okay, I learned about neuroplasticity, stuff like that, and I was like, you can fix your brain. Okay, let's do that. So I started looking up more and more, found like Alan Watts videos and like Zen Buddhism, was listening to a lot of that. And I basically like emptied out my mind and like was ready to be programmed. And then that's when Stefan Molyneux came across my thumbnails in the sidebar from the algorithm. And it was some clickbaity title with a clickbaity thumbnail.
Will you just explain that a little bit? I mean, I would, we have, we obviously have tens of thousands of people who watch the show on YouTube, but we also have tens of thousands who listen on podcast. And I don't know this for sure, but my intuition is that a lot of those people don't use YouTube that much. So when you say like in the column, like what, just to like give us a sense of how you consume YouTube videos, because I think, like I think you take that for granted, and it may not be something that everybody appreciates how YouTube videos are consumed.
Yeah, so basically, like, the good thing about YouTube, the thing that I like about YouTube is that everything's recommended to you. Everything is curated based on what you watch, and they do that through, on the internet, you have all the words that you type in, or all the, you can put in keywords onto a video, so it gets tagged that way, and it gets tagged a couple other ways. But basically, if you watch a bunch of videos on cats, YouTube's going to recommend you more videos on cats. If you're watching videos on sewing, you're going to get more videos on sewing. And so all these videos, they appear either on your homepage when you log in to YouTube, or they appear in the sidebar. And that's like a really convenient thing, because you don't have to, every time you go to YouTube, you're going to get content that you want to see that's helpful to you. And so, I would click on videos, and then over, if you're watching, looking at your YouTube page, you got your video in the top left, and then over on the right, the whole right hand of the web page, you have a recommended list of videos. And those videos are curated to you, like specifically based on this algorithm called Reinforce. That algorithm just picks what it thinks that you're going to watch. And so one of the things that popped up, because I was watching so much self-help, YouTube thinks, okay, well, he's watching self-help. We want him to watch more and more of this because that's how we get ad revenue. This Stefan Molyneux guy, he's got a whole bunch of self-help tags, keywords in his videos, descriptions. Throw him one of those. And I started watching that, and I consumed the hell out of Steph's content. And he had thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of content to consume. And I went through a lot of the self-help stuff. I watched a lot of his call-in shows. The way Stefan Molyneux works is he basically, his wife was like a psychiatrist or something like that, and they used to do shows together until she was basically the Canadian, I don't know, it was some Canadian psychiatrist board or therapist board or whatever, told her that she couldn't be doing that. And so...
And do we know why? Do we know why for sure?
I don't want to speak out of turn. It's been a while since I looked into it, but I'm pretty sure. I believe it was because she was giving out advice on that channel, and that she was not supposed to be doing that outside of her practice.
Okay.
It was something to do with that, but I don't want to. I don't want to slander anybody. You'd have to look into it on your own.
Okay.
But yeah.
Now just to be clear about Stefan Molyneux, because I had a debate with him probably sometime around that time. I can't remember when it was, and it was set up by some third party, and I don't know if we even released it on the channel. But
I watched that.
Did you watch that contemporaneously at that time? Or no? Okay. So he had this whole thing about, what was it, like Mufu or something like this?
Mufu.
Yeah. Tell people what that is, just so that people get a sense of what this guy, he was self-helpy, but also it would go further into like communal type of stuff and then into like politics, but you characterized him in that way. Yeah, so Steph is like your internet dad. He's like the guy on the internet that's giving you advice. And what he would do is people would call into his call-in show, and he would give them advice on their life. He would probably not characterize it this way, but he would basically tell them what they should do. And he would base it in, well, I'm not telling you what to do. This is the objective reality, and you have to make your choice. But basically, Steph's background is that he came from an abusive family, and he was very bitter about that. He spent a lot of time in therapy, and basically at one point he completely excommunicated from his family. And he said that he did this because they were not willing to bend to his morals. They were not willing to
make amends, that they were not apologetic, and so he had to cut them out. And so basically, like, he did this thing called defooing. It's defecting from family of origin, and it's basically saying that if your family doesn't fit your values completely, that you have to get rid of them, that you have to just move on. And so there's a lot of people, there's been a lot of documentaries where people have left their families, where they've never heard from their kids again. I've had private emails where people have sent me, said my friend was watching Molyneux and now he doesn't talk to any of us or his family. So these are like the bases of a cult, and that's why he's been called a cult leader. He even went on Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan, and to his credit, called him out on this, and he never went on that show again. There's even a website, I believe, called defoo.com or defoo.org that goes into a lot of this. But he basically runs a donation-based program. And, I mean, there was a time where he did have meetups where he had a bunch of people come to his home in Canada, but I think he's since stopped doing that. But, so he's got this, like, weird, like, people have described it as, like, an internet cult, like psychology cult, like almost like Scientology, but without the weird alien stuff. And he pulls you onto a call-in show, and then he starts telling you what to do with your life. And then he just it's all this like psychology stuff, but then he mixes it in with like social commentary and politics. And that's what happened to me. Was I was listening to all this psychology stuff, and I was like, well, this is good stuff. This is like real stuff, and it was helping me. But at the same time, I was getting this like weird anarcho-capitalist, libertarian like ideology put in. And over the years, Stefan has increasingly drifted further and further to the right, and to the point where like he's running around with Lauren Southern in New Zealand and Australia and talking about race and IQ with Jared Taylor. So that's kind of the background that I had with Steph. I mean,
so we should say this is a guy who has now moved, as far as I can tell, into full-on Trumpism. Giving up some of the sort of the stricter libertarian ideologies and going deeper into what I would argue, in my opinion, libertarianism at its foundation ultimately is a philosophy that has been developed to provide for some white supremacy, some type of rationale for white supremacy. If you dig deep enough down there, it basically is like, well, property rights start basically when Europeans established property rights and that type of thing. But just so that people get a sense of a characterization of what this guy is. Should also say, to be fair, Dave Rubin, I think, said that he and Stefan Molyneux were forming the new center, but I think he may have scrubbed that by now. But so that's this guy. You basically fell down that wormhole. Where did that lead you?
So where that led me was this is the mindset going in, and it seems to be the same mindset that Steph followed. So I was listening to all of his content, and the most radical thing I got at that point was the race and IQ stuff. And I was so naive, I thought that was just science. And race realism, meaning that you can explain the social outcomes of what we call races. So you can explain why black people have lower IQ scores, and you can explain why black people have higher crime rates and, statistically live in higher rates of poverty. This can all be explained through genetics. So that was the most radical idea I picked up from Steph pretty much right away. And, it goes into the whole libertarian free will thing. It goes into the whole, justifying hierarchies. And from there, I was in this mindset that, okay, so I want this free society based on freedom, because that was my big thing. I enjoy freedom. And so I went from there to being a conservative, because I was like, well, if I want that free society, we need social cohesion, we need borders, we need families, all this stuff. We basically need traditionalism. And from there, I went even further into, they were calling themselves civic nationalists, but I'd call them the alt-right. And they're basically like a watered-down version, a co-opted form of white supremacy of the alt-right. And that's kind of where I settled. And it was both going through the logical process of the ideology that led me there, and it was also the algorithm which led me there, because constantly in my sidebar I'm clicking more and more videos. So Steph would have someone on his show, I'd go check out their channel, or it would recommend a channel to me. And I went from watching Steph to watching like Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder. Then I found myself watching more of like Lauren Southern, Gavin McInnes. Started watching Steph again, kind of came full circle there. And then at the very bottom of it, I was beginning to listen to like Jared Taylor. And, you know, Jared Taylor is like just a straight up white supremacist. He wouldn't describe himself that way, but he runs that organization American Renaissance, and they just basically have neo-Nazis come in there and give speeches. So that's kind of the trajectory that I fell through. It was both through the guiding principles of the ideology, the logical conclusion of that ideology, in my opinion, and then also the algorithm which was driving me in that direction.
Were there any things that functioned as validators? Like, obviously it's set up when these guys have each other on their own shows that they validate each other by their presence, right? I mean, but were there people outside of this circle that you've talked about, of these people, who functioned as validators to you? I mean, and then I want to ask that, and ask also, to the extent, did the algorithm just function to serve this stuff up to you, or did it also function as some type of validator?
I don't know if so much the fact that it was being recommended to me was a validation in terms of the algorithm. What I did find myself thinking back then was, well, if YouTube is this great platform, because I had so much respect for YouTube, and I saw it as like, well, this is where all the people with the real ideas are. You know, this is like, I saw this as like the alternative news network, right? Like, this was the real truth. And I thought, well, why aren't there any lefties on here? Like, I know about the Young Turks, but they seem very overproduced, and that's pretty much corporate media, or at least I thought at the time. And so the fact that I didn't see many lefty content creators or people debating these people, I just thought that the right wing was correct because of that. I just figured, well, I mean, yeah, they're just right. That's why there aren't any lefty YouTubers, because it was so saturated at that time. You know, we have BreadTube now, and your channel's getting more popular, but at that time, all we really had were the right-wing YouTubers, the Paul Joseph Watsons, the Gavin McInnes, Steven Crowder, all those types.
That's interesting. So I mean, it sounds like on some level, you assumed the algorithm would feed you what existed, as opposed to...
I thought it would. Or I thought those people would come and debate. I thought it would give that to me. I didn't really think about it, that it was only serving me right-wing content. Because, like, your show's been around for a while. Pacman's show's been around for a while. Like, lots of people's show's been around for a while. But I might have saw Pacman one time during this time period. Like, I never saw it. And, like, on top of that, in terms of validation, what really would validate... So this was how it worked for me, was I put Steph as an authority figure. And basically, like, if he would do an interview with a guest, and it would be a favorable interview, like they were getting along, it was a softball interview, I thought, oh, okay, well, like, they get along, and Steph vetted this person. I mean, I should start listening to their content too. And it was kind of like dumb the way I did it. I kind of went in blindly consuming things, but I would watch, you know, he would have Gavin on, I'd start watching Gavin. And then, like, when it really, like, the big validators were any time that someone that appeared center or left would have conversations with these people, and it would seem reasonable. So, like, if Jordan Peterson went and talked with Stefan Molyneux, oh, okay, well, that validates that what Steph's saying correct, because now Jordan's talking to him. Jordan's got this huge platform. They had a really good conversation. Jordan isn't calling him a Nazi. Jordan isn't calling him a racist, and Jordan's not a racist. So what the fuck? Like, this is silly. And so that would be a validation. Rubin's show was a huge validator for me, because I just saw Rubin as a leftist. I thought Rubin was a liberal.
Well, he's a classic liberal.
Classic.
I'm curious. I mean, let's talk about Dave Rubin for a second, because you know, it is my the dynamic you've just described is my biggest problem with him, is that he's doing, you know, he's able to pose as a leftist or a liberal less and less, it seems to me. And part of that is, I think a lot of us have made a concerted effort to make that more difficult. But if you can remember what you were thinking when you tuned in to Dave Rubin for the first time and when he had these people on, like, walk us through the mental process, or, just sort of like, the narrative in your head that was playing.
Yeah, so Dave Rubin, I found his content very early on. I don't know how he got into the algorithm so quick, but I found his show when he had that first little set. I think it was might have been either Sam Harris or Milo was the first interview that I watched. And I mean, I thought Dave Rubin seemed like a nice guy. He had a cool looking set. And like basically he was having on guests that were like confirming everything that I believed. And like he kept repeating, I'm a liberal. The left has gone insane. And to me, that was almost like a validation. It's like, well, maybe that's why I went to the right wing. Maybe I went to the right wing because all the lefties have lost their minds now, and they're all SJWs and screaming about Trump. Maybe that's why I went to the right. There was that. I mean, his show, like, I would get.
So when is this? When you first see Rubin and you start to get that validation from him? What year? Do you know?
It probably was. I'd have to look at when he started that first YouTube channel, but I would say it was probably 2016. Yeah, it had to be.
Okay.
It had to have been 2016.
Okay, fair enough. And so and how much? I mean, was he a regular that you watched, or you just sort of like stumbled across him as you're following some of the other guests? Would he introduce you to other people, or would he just function to sort of like give another angle on people that you are already following?
Both. I mean, I would watch Rubin's show pretty religiously because he just had on a lot of guests. So it was like for someone like me that liked to consume content, and like what I would like to do is I would like to find someone new and then kind of just devour their content. And so like Rubin's show was really good for that because he would have on a ton of guests. And it would always be political, and then it would always be like right-wing people, which is what I wanted to hear. And so, yeah, I mean, it served as like a huge gateway into other creators. Some creators that I found through him that I wouldn't have found otherwise. There was like, I remember the climate change denier dudes. Like there was that old guy from the Greenpeace thing, I believe, that he went on Dave Rubin's show. And then I know the other guy definitely went on. I can't remember his name, but he was like the case for the moral case for fossil fuels or something. He was like a younger guy, and both those guys are paid off by oil lobbies to push anti-climate change science. And so I remember finding them on there, and I found that extremely validating. I'm trying to think if there was anybody else that I found explicitly through Rubin, but I would always tune into Rubin. Like if Rubin had Milo on, I was going to watch that interview. Or if he had, when he had Molyneux on, I was super excited. And so yeah, I mean, to me, Rubin's show was just a validator that I was on the right path.
Other shows like that functioned to sort of platform, like serve up, I guess, in the right way to you? I mean, did you ever come across people like Sam Harris or I'm trying to think of others who are sort of like IDW adjacent? You said Peterson. Who else? Was Sam Harris at all?
Sam Harris for sure. I wouldn't listen to it too much. I just couldn't bear mattress ads. But I would listen to Sam Harris's podcast every once in a while, and I would notice that he had a lot of right-wing people on there. And I hate to say it, but Joe Rogan's show, I really love Joe Rogan's show still. I don't think Joe is like trying to do this intentionally, but I don't think he totally grasps what's going on. So Joe's show, I would like when Gavin went on Joe's show, I got super excited. One of the first podcasts I listened to of Joe Rogan was the Milo podcast. That's around the time I started getting into Joe's show more and more.
And
yeah, Joe Rogan's show, unfortunately.
And any others? I mean,
not that I can remember off the top of my head. I mean, the people that had Steph would have on a lot of guests. I found a lot of guests through Steph's show, but
Did you
Yeah, not
go and
secular-
read any of this stuff? I mean, like Milo at that time, I imagine he was, still at Breitbart. Did you go and read Breitbart, or did you just all stay in the YouTube universe?
Yeah, it's kind of embarrassing. I didn't do much reading at the time. I'd read an article here and there, but like I just was so addicted to YouTube. Like I would literally walk around and with headphones in my ear everywhere I went. And then especially when I got that job at the warehouse, they allowed us to listen to headphones, and I was consuming probably like close to 16 hours a day of YouTube. And that's just where my head was at. And I listened to YouTube and I listened to podcasts, and that was how I consumed information. And even if I'd went and like saw something, like read something that was like counter to these guys, I wouldn't have believed it, because what they teach you is that they have the real truth, that you can't trust the mainstream media at all. They're completely lying to you. So it wouldn't have mattered if I read something that was calling them a Nazi or something like that. I wouldn't have, or racist or whatever.
What about Alex Jones?
I would watch Alex Jones for entertainment. Alex Jones, the way I thought of him, he was like your crazy Republican uncle that you agreed with, but then he would start talking about like stuff that was like a little bit wacko. So I didn't watch Alex Jones' show very seriously, because it's just like ridiculous. Like he was just way too ridiculous. But I did see Alex Jones was on my side, obviously, and I thought Alex Jones did do good work.
To what extent did you have like any in real life interactions that reinforce this, or were you just basically alone through this? Let's answer that, and then I want to ask if you had any sort of similar interactions online. But let's just in real life, like were you completely isolated? Would you come home and you tell this to your folks, and they were just like, oh boy?
Well, I mean, the thing is I lived in rural West Virginia, so most people were Republicans. And so while some of my ideas were a little bit more radical than what most Republicans have, I wouldn't probably have talked about that stuff specifically. And I was pretty good at like not explicitly saying things anyway, because I knew it was controversial and I didn't want to get like ostracized by everybody. So like I wouldn't have talked about race and IQ just out the gate with somebody. So I didn't have a whole lot of pushback in my life. I did date a girl, that traditional Christian girl that Dave Rubin likes to go on and on about, that I dated. I spent a lot of time with her, and she was like a very compassionate person, and I know that she would get disturbed when I talk about mass immigration, and I'd say, well, just lock down the borders and let them sit there. If they come across the channel, just throw them back. If they force their way in, you've got to shoot them. You know, that's like kind of like where my headspace was at, as horrible as it is, but I would say stuff like that, and she would get upset, but she wouldn't push back on me too much. She had a brother-in-law who I found out at one time read the Communist Manifesto in high school, and I just like would argue with him like crazy. And like at a certain point, he just stopped arguing with me. He just stopped having those conversations, and I could tell he would get uncomfortable. So mostly just in my normal life with friends. I never got part of any movements. I didn't live far from Charlottesville, but I didn't go to the Charlottesville rally or anything.
Was that were you in the mindset that you would have contemplated going to Charlottesville at that time? Were you looking at it as like maybe I should have gone, or were you just sort of like rooting it on, or how did that impact you?
After the fact with Charlottesville, when I saw like all the swastikas and stuff, I was really confused. I mean, I was behind the whole Confederate statue thing. I thought, they shouldn't take down the statues. It's history. They should put those statues in a museum, or they should leave them up. That people are just being ridiculous. And I believed that rally was just about the statues. And I guess for some people it was. But I didn't actually know about Charlottesville until it happened. Because I wasn't in Gab chats or anything, so I didn't know about the Unite the Right rally. But after it happened, I watched the coverage, and I was just really confused. I was like, why are all these Nazis here? Like, they don't belong here. Like, this isn't a Nazi movement. We're civic nationalists. We're patriots. We care about our country. Like, I didn't really understand. It wasn't until later when I would watch videos by ContraPoints that she would break down the ideologies and show me that I believed in a watered-down version of what those Nazis believed. That was jarring for me. So, but I do remember the Heather Heyer incident. I remember looking at that video and thinking, well, the left must be lying about this, and like, well, maybe he was scared, and I kind of like entertained that whole conspiracy theory in my head for a little while. Later, when I saw him holding up like Nazi shields, I was like, what the fuck? Like, so Charlottesville was a jarring event for me. But no, I wouldn't have been able to attend anyway. I had work and responsibilities in life.
All right. So, so how did this begin to turn for you? So you're deep in this. You're a little bit, around Charlottesville. You're a little bit confused as to why certain associations are coming your way, and I guess theoretically, right, you could have headed down that route. But what happened?
Well,
or let me just before you do that, actually, let me just get back to, was there anywhere online that you were engaging with people who were reinforcing what you were saying? Was it just chat rooms on YouTube, or was that something you were into, or did you not engage on that level because you're just listening on your phone at work, or did you go onto Reddit in some place? I mean, was there anywhere else where you had like a community?
Surprisingly, no. I had a small group of friends that I played games with, and they had right-wing beliefs. So, like, a couple of the guys in there were libertarians, and then a few of them were like hard, borders, conservatives, conservatives that care a lot about the border and stuff like that. And they would repeat talking points they picked up from Peterson and stuff like cultural Marxism, but they never seemed to have got as invested in the politics stuff as me, so I don't think they ever went as deep. So I had those guys to bounce ideas off with, and I think like hanging out with them probably it gave me that social aspect where I didn't need to go onto Reddit and talk with randos. So no, I didn't spend time on 4chan. I didn't go on to Reddit or Discord or anything like that. I'm kind of glad I didn't, because if I had, I probably would have gotten pulled deeper into it.
I would think that most people, that's the way it goes for most young people. I mean, or I don't know what the order would be, but that they get that type of reinforcement that is sort of like completely, that is responsive, right? Like, hey, why is there a Nazi shield there? And I would imagine there's a lot of young people in your situation who log on to Reddit and someone says, well, because, and sort of rationalizes it, makes it a little bit easier for you to like sort of accept it.
Exactly. If I had had that real-time feedback, and, we've set up a Discord server since to try to help de-radicalize kids online. And what we've run into is a lot of they're educated fascists. They know what they're talking about. They've read Evola, they've studied that stuff, and they really understand National Socialism and, fascism. If I had run into those guys, they probably could have convinced me, because the ideology that I was following was basically their ideology. When it got into the form of civic nationalism that I was into, I probably could have fell into fascism pretty easily. I think that social reinforcement is what really keeps people there. It might be the reason that it was easy for me to come out, because I was such a lurker and I didn't have a community holding me back.
Right.
But I see a lot of people online, and I saw a post. I wish I would have screen capped this post, but it was right after my video went viral, and I don't know if it was a troll or not, but it seemed sincere. It was on 4chan. It said, I watched this guy's video, Faraday Speaks, and like his story seems so true to me. Like, this is exactly what I went through, but like, I don't know what to do. I don't want to leave the alt-right. You guys are my friends. And that was like really haunting to me, that would hold someone in that place.
I mean, I'm not making any equivalences here in terms of like the sort of the egregiousness, but in terms of the dynamic, was it Dr. Death, the Errol Morris film about the guy who used to work in I think he was like a consultant to states to provide executions, was sort of adopted by neo-Nazis in Germany who were Holocaust deniers, and it just became like, well, I got to play a certain role to just maintain like the attention I'm getting from people, which is nice. He was a loner, and so in this instance, not having a community that was sort of like directly responsive for you probably kept you less than sort of nailed down, as it were, ideologically. How did you break out? I just did literally, we're pre-taping this on Thursday, the 27th. I just did a stream with Destiny, and for the first time, and basically I did it because I've heard you talk about Destiny had somehow gotten into the algorithm, as you call it, and given you a different perspective.
Yeah, so that's great to hear you talk with Stephen. So the way I got out, it was completely by chance. I think that there was a lot of stuff that I was seeing with the alt-right that was disturbing me, but I think I could have come up with rationalizations if I kept watching content. Because remember, I was watching Jared Taylor and that stuff and the American Renaissance videos, and that was really dragging me into more of the white identitarian stuff. Although luckily at the same time I was watching Destiny and ContraPoints. So what happened was I was on YouTube one day, going through, clicking through my sidebar, watching videos, and this thumbnail popped up, and it said, "Talk with Martin Shkreli." And I liked Martin Shkreli at the time because I was like Mr. Capitalist, and I thought Martin Shkreli did nothing wrong. This is how business works. This is like all that stuff. And referring to him hiking those drug prices.
Right.
And so I thought, oh, cool. So I watched that video with Martin Shkreli and Destiny, and it wasn't even a debate because Destiny admitted in the video he didn't know much about healthcare. And so Martin Shkreli kind of like had a cordial conversation with him. And I thought, oh, well, Destiny must agree with Martin. Maybe Destiny must be a right-winger. And then I watched Destiny debated Athene Wins, the gamer that I talked about earlier that first introduced me to the neuroscience, ironically. He debated him and beat him in a debate. And thought, oh, well, shoot, like Destiny like really knows his stuff because Athene's a smart guy. And then that's when the algorithm recommended the Lauren Southern conversation. And I remember it clearly now. I was excited and made her look like an absolute fool. And that was the crack in the dam. And the conversation they had was mass immigration into Europe during the 2015 refugee crisis. And that was a huge sticking point for me. That was bigger for me than the IQ stuff, the race. And I watched that debate, and it got me questioning things. It didn't flip my mind because I thought, well, Destiny could be wrong. I don't know. But I started watching more and more Destiny because I enjoyed those conversations and debates that he had. And then he started debating people like Sargon of Akkad. He debated Nick Fuentes. He debated like a whole bunch of these right-wingers. And just one after one just cut them down and destroyed their arguments. And that was really jarring. And then through the algorithm, he did a conversation with ContraPoints. And I remember it popping up now. It was like talk with like transgender or something. And I was like, well, I don't know. I'm kind of skeeved out by transgender people, but I guess I'll listen to this. And I listened to it, and ContraPoints seemed all right. And then I remember her videos started getting recommended to me, and they had very interesting thumbnails, so I started clicking on those. And I just started listening. I remember watching her decrypting the alt-right video. And I sat down, and I thought, how is that so accurate? Like, in that video, she basically talked about dog whistles and talked about how the alt-right takes a message like white civilization, like white supremacy, and turns it into Western civilization. Or they'll take something like the Jewish conspiracy, the JQ, that the Jews control the world, and they'll turn that into cultural Marxism, saying that Marxists have invaded our society and are controlling our society. And like when I sat and listened to that, I couldn't really deny any of it. I was like, wow, that's pretty damn. And that was really jarring for me to like see that everything that I had believed was just like a bunch of bogus science and Nazi conspiracy theories and all this stuff. And it was from there that I basically started to, now at the time I was also listening to Jared Taylor, so I was kind of going through this battle in my mind over, and I remember being afraid. I remember listening to Jared and I was like, what if he's right? But I watched more and more content on the other side. Because after I found ContraPoints, I started finding people like Sean and Three Arrows and H Bomber Guy and all these other YouTubers that were, lefty, center left to far left YouTubers. I remember watching your show a lot, and that helped get me off the libertarian mindset. And so it just basically exposed a lot of stuff to me. Exposed how a lot of these people on the right are grifters. They do this for money. They make bad arguments. And I just started to kind of deprogram myself. At the same time, I was also having some life experiences at my job that were making me less than happy about the current system we have in terms of like the economy. I started having experiences in my dating where I dated a girl that was very wealthy, and I would listen to the way that she would describe poor people and, all this stuff. That turned me off of a lot of right-wing thinking. And then I also spent some time in Destiny's Discord server having conversations with people where I'd basically go in and my ideas would just get destroyed, and I'm like, and then they would like help me recontextualize the things that I believe, and I was like, oh, okay. And it's probably about 8-9 months ago that I just said, well, that's all bullshit. Like all that stuff that I believed before, it was just wrong. And that was the process.
Wow. I mean, it's
that took about a year and a half, by the way. Wasn't just right.
That process. That's fascinating to me. And you and this is in the absence of any of those other, I guess, influences that would preclude such like the cost of you switching did not mean that you had to leave your friends. Did not mean that, you weren't getting invited to the parties on Friday night or whatever. I mean, I think people can underestimate the value of having some type of social circle and how much of that ideology becomes intertwined with just sort of a sense of belonging.
Yeah, I mean, my right-wing friends were upset with me at first and annoyed with me, but I guess eventually they just came to accept it. But I didn't have like that group of like hardcore fascists or Nazis that were like guilting me into staying, because I've seen that from other people that have messaged me. But I didn't have that, and so I think it was easier for me to just walk away from it because of that.
In that original video that you put out, you did say that there were going to be people mad at you. Like, who were the people that you were talking to? Obviously, don't tell me the specific names, but I'm just saying, like, who were they?
Oh, I mean, just the alt-right. I knew the alt-right was going to be pissed. I knew the alt-lighters would be pissed. I figured the conservatives would be pissed because I knew that they were going to think that I was slandering them and calling them Nazis, and that's predictably in the comment section. I see people say, "You think Ben Shapiro's a Nazi?" And I'm like, I never said that. I've never said that. So I just figured a lot of people were going to be upset. At the beginning, when that video went pretty viral and got a lot of attention, but not too many people covered it. I think the only right-winger that covered it was Nick Fuentes. Now, when the New York Times article went viral, that was a shit show. It was all over, this, it was all over political YouTube. And, it's weird, like, to have been involved in that world for so long, and then hearing all these content creators that you used to listen to that you now kind of despise, and they're all chanting your name and calling you a grifter and saying you're a plant by the FBI. They've made up the most insane conspiracy theories I've ever heard in my life. I don't think I'll ever believe in another conspiracy theory again, because it's just like when you have one made about you, you can see how obvious, like how contrived they are.
Right.
I was worried about, and I have received death threats. I would go on 4chan and I would see, we're going to hang him next to that man in a dress, referring to Natalie ContraPoints, and that's when I went out and bought the gun, because I was like, these people are nuts.
Oh, so you have a weapon now?
Well, of course, yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. And so tell me about that New York Times article. I know there were some people, not going to drag you into these type of controversies, but I know there were some people who felt that this was unfair, that the New York Times was trying to, inappropriately malign YouTube. Give me your sense of the article, A, and then B, the idea that there is something problematic. Just not to say that YouTube should be completely obliterated, but that there's something problematic with YouTube.
Yeah. So, first of all, the article. I thought the article got the thesis nailed down pretty pat. Kevin did a good job. And, I made that very clear to them when they came to interview me. They basically just reached out to me during email. I don't know how they found the video, but they did. And, when I called them, I said, look, man, I don't want to give this off to some random reporter that's just going to do some, crappy job, because journalists, the mainstream media, is really bad at reporting on the alt-right. And he said, we got you, and we sat and we did a podcast. I don't know if that's going to get released or not, but we did a long interview, and I felt like they asked me all the right questions. When it released, they don't give you any heads up on these things, as it turns out. They just dropped it when it was convenient. I think that they did that in concert with the Steven Crowder debacle with Carlos, is it Maza?
Yep.
So they released it. It was kind of out of left field for me. I might have gotten one text from Kevin, and when I read through it, I was like, okay, they got it down pretty pat. That's exactly how it happened. In terms of the funnel, in terms of the algorithm, how the algorithm works, and in terms of how the logic of going from conservative to, or libertarian to conservative to ultra-nationalist, how that works. Things I didn't like about the article was they kind of, I almost felt like I was portrayed as a victim a little bit too much. So it was also they were saying, at the end of the article, they prefaced something about Caleb still continues to watch hours of content on YouTube a day, and when asked if he would step away, he said, I can't step away, that YouTube is where it's at, or something like that. And I just felt like that was a little, I didn't like that. It's almost like, okay, now I'm getting brainwashed down another rabbit hole, which is just simply not true. So that I wasn't happy about that. But in general, the article covered everything, and I thought it covered everything fairly. It didn't smear conservatives as Nazis. It didn't do any of the predictable things that sometimes happens with journalists. So I was really happy with how Kevin basically covered the story. And then in terms of, what was your other question?
I guess whether the thing was fair, and whether you think that. Let's talk about the critique of YouTube. I guess.
So with YouTube, it's not pushing anybody in a particular political agenda. I know that there's this controversy now, and I don't know too much to make of that. I guess they are a liberal or whatever institution, so they're not going to be very pro-Trump. But from what I can tell, they didn't care too much about what was going on. In fact, I remember allegedly maybe hearing rumors that the CEO didn't think that there was a problem, that just didn't exist. There was no alt-right pipeline on YouTube, even though the alt-right jokes about it. They talk about the libertarian to alt-right pipeline. Mike Enoch and them talk about that all the time. And so I don't know. I didn't feel like YouTube was taking the problem very seriously from what I was seeing. The platform, the biggest problem I see with it isn't so much that they allow the content to go on the platform, but they basically give the content creators, whether for good or ill, this super weapon. And the super weapon is that algorithm. And not only do they give them that algorithm, but they allow them to monetize through that algorithm, which allows them to expand their operations. And that algorithm is just, it's one of the most advanced things that we've created. The smartest minds in the world are working on that thing, and they don't even fully understand how it works. It's like a black box. They know that they put information in, and they know that that information comes out. But it's machine learning. They don't know how the algorithm does it. So I just see that algorithm as a very irresponsible creation. It's a nice creation. It helps, you can get a very quick education on YouTube due to that algorithm. But
well, how do you know so much about the algorithm? Let me put it that way. What do you know about the algorithm other than how you received, how it served things up to you?
Well, I'm not a data scientist, but I've read a little bit on it in terms of, like I said, that it's a black box, that they don't fully know how it works. I know that that's true of these algorithms, because I just read a lot on science and technology and stuff. But most of my understanding of how the algorithm works, it's actually just intuitive from just spending so much time on the platform. Right. So you just get a feel for what it's doing. That's basically how I've come to a lot of those conclusions. But yeah,
do you use YouTube differently Like, do you have some type of practice now when you watch YouTube that is different, or do you just like do you do anything to counter the algorithm in terms of what you get?
Well, my algorithm, if I go on my main account, my algorithm's completely screwed up at this point. I mean, I've got, I could be flicking through there and I will get Molyneux videos, I'll get your videos, I'll get ContraPoints videos, I'll get JS videos. Because now that I've watched stuff on both sides, I get everything recommended to me in terms of the algorithm. Because the algorithm doesn't delineate between it doesn't delineate between politics. It's only saying, okay, they're watching a lot of these videos that are 2-3 hours long or, whatever. So now I get stuff all across the spectrum. I don't spend as much time on YouTube these days, partially because I'm busy. And I mean, it's not really a source of entertainment anymore because now this is kind of like what I do as not so much a job, but in terms of work. So I don't spend too much time on that platform. But when I do, it's not so much the way I use YouTube, it's just the way I listen to information. I just don't take anything for granted. When someone says something, I'm just like, okay, maybe that's true.
Okay, and you got to validate it. All right, so what would you do to fix, if you think, okay, because, and I want to just, I know we're going long here, but I just want to spend a couple of minutes on what you're actually doing now. But before we get there, what would you have YouTube do if you think, or is there anything for them to do?
I mean, you could censor people, you could deplatform people and demonetize them and all that. And I don't even know how, in the past I've called for that in terms of like some of the more extreme creators like Mike Enoch and Rich Spencer. But I don't even know if that's the right approach at this point because those people know their platforms, they know their channels, and they'll just funnel people off platform. I almost wonder if the right thing to do to get the lefty YouTubers together and have them debate these people and to get into the algorithm. Because that's what happened to me. That's how I found the other side. I almost wonder if it's just going to have to come down to us. In terms of what YouTube does, I don't know. Anything that I call for YouTube to do to that side, they're going to do to all sides.
Right.
So if I say, okay, YouTube, take away the algorithm from them. Let them put their videos up, but just don't let it to everybody.
Well, I mean, but is that necessarily a bad thing? I mean, you can take, because look, people who've been deplatformed have really, it has inhibited, it seems to me, maybe you don't know because it's underground, but I suspect it's inhibited their growth and their ability to, like you say, get the cash to build out an operation to reach more people. It's true, you take people off platform, they're on Gab, maybe they go deeper down to that, but there's no fresh recruits. There's no expansion of those belief sets. There is, this is part of the argument why I think we need to break up YouTube is so that you can't make as much money on a single platform. You don't have the ability to expand and bring more people in, that it would require, sort of like more, you need to be more self-directed in a smaller platform, it seems to me. But because I want to talk about like what we do in the absence of YouTube do anything, but I'm curious, I guess the idea is that YouTube gave you the opportunity to get out of there, but it's like, it set fire to the wastebasket and then it brought water, but that fire could have, tipped over and gotten to the drapes and
Yeah, but it's completely unguided. I mean, deplatforming does work. We saw that with Alex Jones. We saw that with Milo. I mean, Milo completely fell apart, and Alex Jones is just, struggling to stay afloat. Luckily, he has a very devout user base. It would definitely cut their funnel off. They wouldn't have the funnel anymore. Like I said, I mean, that algorithm, that's the most powerful tool. It's not the fact that they have an upload platform. They have BitChute, but BitChute's not very popular, and it doesn't recommend videos in the same way. So, I mean, that is always an option to just take the algorithm or take the, I guess they would call it a shadow ban. There's always that. Really what I think YouTube needs to do is it seems like they backpedal on their terms of service. Like they need to have a very clear terms of service. But it seems like the issue that I see is that any time that they try to enforce the rules, the conservatives, the entirety of the right wing, like joined lockstep together and will push back. And sometimes they've even helped people like Molyneux. They've helped like alt-right channels get their videos put back up. So I guess that's where YouTube is at, is if they try to do anything, they're going to have a huge backlash, and that's going to be bad profitably. So I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't think it's right that people are on there spreading conspiracy theories. That's not right. People on there talking about Jews control the world, that's not right. Like, I don't see how that's allowed in their terms of service. And the thing is people just use dog whistles. I mean, that's what they do on Enoch's show. They just don't say Jews. They just say they or them or
right.
some other word. But, like, it's just obvious that they're doing very malicious stuff. So I don't know. YouTube should have a strict terms of service that they enforce on everybody. The Steven Crowder thing was pretty obvious. Like, Steven Crowder was saying things that were directly against their terms of service, and they didn't want to do anything about it. That's not right.
All right. So tell me what you're doing, just briefly. So you've basically started a project to deal with kids, young people like you were, right? Is that basically it?
Yeah, that's basically it. So, I mean, when I made that video because I wanted to educate lefties, because I heard a lot of people, what I was seeing was I would go into Discord servers, lefty Discord servers, and I would see, like, conservatives or libertarians or, God forbid, an alt-righter come in there, and they would come in alone, and they would get what we call on the internet dunked on. They would crap all over them, call them an idiot, call them names, and then that alt-righter or that right-winger or whoever it was, they would get all frustrated and they would leave and they'd never come back. And I kept seeing this happening over and over again. And then I also kept seeing people say, Ben Shapiro's a Nazi, Jordan Peterson's a Nazi. And I'm like, well, no, they're not Nazis. And then they'd say, Stefan Molyneux's alt-right. And I'd be like, well, no, Molyneux's alt-right. And I constantly found myself explaining these things. And so I thought, well, I'll make that video. And that's why I made the original video, was to try to wake people up to what was going on. And I did that video, and then it blew up, and then all of a sudden I had all these volunteers pour in. They were like, do you have a Discord server? So I set up a Discord server. And then, one second. So I set up a Discord server, and all of a sudden, a bunch of volunteers just started pouring in, and we started getting in talks about, well, how do we de-radicalize people? I shared my thoughts on things that I'd seen on other servers. So eventually it just kind of organically took on a life of its own. And so now we have a Discord server, and there are a group of what we call helpers, and they're basically trying to engage in conversation with a lot of these people that have fallen into these ideologies. It's tough because there's a lot of people that are very entrenched in it, but we've gotten people in there, and we've gotten them to open up. Basically, the thing we're trying to use the most is just reasoning things with them very clearly, and then using compassion and empathy with them so that they don't feel attacked. Like, they feel like they have a space where they can explore, kind of wind down their ideas. And so that's what we're doing online right now. It's very experimental. I don't know anybody else that's tried anything like this. But I'm in talks with CVE researchers and other extremist researchers to try to get resources and help in determining how to do this. But that's basically where we're at now. It's a very new project.
Do you have any type of place where people can get more information? Or they just follow you on Twitter or what?
Follow me on Twitter at Faraday Speaks. And if you go to my YouTube videos, you go into the link in the description of my videos, you can find the Discord server there. You'll also find my all my other links, Patreon link, emails, the Discord server, all that stuff. So any way you need to get a hold of me on there, you can get a hold of me in the description of my videos. And I will pin the tweet to the Discord server on my Twitter so that people can find the Discord server on there as well. If anybody wants to volunteer, have any kind of special expertise that they have, we'd love to have people come and help.
Caleb, fascinating story, and I appreciate your coming on, telling us. I appreciate the work that you're doing now, but thank you for your time. We'll put links in the show descriptions as well. Thanks again, Caleb.
Thank you. Thank you.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me don't get paid for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my